Hey, my name is Miranda, and I'm 16 years old. Actually, this is not my real name. It stuck to me when my second life began. But I'm going to tell you about my first life, which lasted from the moment I was born until the age of 6. I spent these years locked up in a private medical centre. It was a solemn decision for my mother. Although I was completely healthy, I never left the clinic, not even for a single day. Most of the things I'm about to tell you, I don't know firsthand. For example, everything I learned about my biological parents, I heard from my guardians. I have never met my father. As for my mum, well, I can barely remember her. I know that they were immigrants from Colombia and that they lived in the US for a while before I was born, and they were pretty rich. I don't know how my father made his fortune, but when my mother was pregnant with me, he was convicted and got a long-term sentence. So I guess he was engaged in some kind of illegal activity. I also know that my mother never had to work for a living. When her husband was arrested, she still had access to his money. So as soon as she was left alone, she put herself in a private medical clinic for something called pregnancy preservation. There she could be provided with the proper level of comfort and complete care before my birth. And my mother was indeed provided with full care and comfort. It was a special kind of clinic, and I'm not sure if it was just some clinic for people who had money. I think it was a clinic for a special kind of people who have money. My mother had an excellent diet, exceptional care, and an individual nurse who made sure that she did not need anything. But it seemed that all this did not really help, and my mother gave birth to me when she was in her 25th week of pregnancy. Believe me, this is very early. I weighed less than 2.5 pounds, and without the medical intervention of the best doctors at this clinic, I would have just died. Even after so many years, it's hard for me to think about it. So for that, I am sincerely grateful to these doctors. My mother left the clinic as soon as she recovered, but I had spent several months in intensive care, and after that, I also needed special medical interventions, so I stayed at the clinic. Mum continued to pay the bills for the clinic, while I gradually got better and started to resemble a normal baby. The doctors were pleased with my progress, and soon they called my mother to the clinic to go over all the necessary instructions and recommendations before she took me home. But much to their surprise, it turned out that my mother had no intentions of taking me home. She began to argue with the doctors, insisting that since I was born prematurely, there was no way I could be a normal child. She said that my heart, lungs, kidneys, and all my other internal organs were underdeveloped. And most importantly, my mother believed that since I was born so prematurely, my brain simply did not have enough time to develop properly. She had already decided that my life would be limited to a vegetable existence. The doctors tried to convince my mother that the situation was exactly the opposite, but she refused to listen to them. And yet, she did not give up on me. I think this was more of a detriment to me than anything else, because otherwise I could have started to live a normal life much earlier. My mum signed an agreement with the clinic that she would continue to pay for my care there. The head of the clinic signed it in the apparent hope that one day she would change her mind. Well, this is how the story of my childhood, where I was locked in the clinic, began. I got a separate room where I could live without attracting anyone's attention. The head of the clinic arranged a place to stay and food to eat for me. Besides, my mother paid separately for the services of a nanny, who was supposed to be with me around the clock. The rest of the medical staff knew about my existence in the clinic, but they were bound by a non-disclosure agreement. Apparently, the head did not want this situation to go public and harm the impeccable reputation of his clinic. All of my early childhood memories are connected with this clinic, but at the same time, each new day there was similar to the previous one. I woke up, the nanny fed me, gave me some toys, and turned on the TV with some cartoons. Sometimes she read to me. When the nanny needed to leave my room, she locked the door from the outside. I began to notice this very early and tried different tricks to open the door. But I wasn't allowed to leave my room during the day. Nobody was supposed to see me. Neither the other little patients of this clinic nor their parents. And of course, I wasn't given any explanation as to why I could not go outside, even though I saw other children. The window in my room overlooked the courtyard where the nurses walked with their little patients. I saw them playing in the sunshine outside. I cried and asked the nanny why I couldn't go outside and see them and play, but I never got any answers. Mum hired a very professional nanny for me. She did only what she was being paid for, and she wasn't paid to go for a walk with me outside my room, so it wasn't her responsibility. Once I managed to trick my nanny. It was evening, so she was tired and dozed off in an armchair. I snuck through the open door and left the room. I was in the corridor, which unfortunately ended with another door that I couldn't open. But there was a big window on that door. It was muddy, but pretty transparent. I brought a chair, climbed upon it, and began to look through the glass. The room separated by the door was filled with people. I recognised the doctors and the nurses who I had seen before, but there were also patients. I watched my peers play, and I felt closer to them now than when I was watching them through my room window. But then one of the boys noticed some movement from the other side of the glass door. He came to look closer through the glass, and then I think that on the other side it was muddier, so he didn't see me, even when I could already see him well. I leaned very close to the glass. The boy could see me, and got really scared. He started shouting something about ghosts in this clinic, and started crying hysterically. The nurses immediately realised what was happening. One of them went to calm the boy and his mother down, and the others immediately took me to my room. I think I was wearing white clothing, and my pitch-black hair had grown long by then, and my face was always pale from the lack of sun. Yeah, I guess I did look like a ghost from a horror movie. After that, my nanny was replaced, but the new nanny didn't last long either. She got attached to me and started to demand that they improve my living conditions, which neither my mother nor the head of the clinic would approve of. According to their logic, I had everything that I needed. I was just not allowed to talk to other patients. So they both decided to fire this kind woman, and they hired a third nanny, and she was a dreadful woman. Over time, my mother lost any interest in me and limited her presence in my life to paying the bills from the clinic. Seeing that nobody cared, my third nanny took full advantage of this and did not take any more care of me than was needed to sustain my life. I saw her only 3 times a day, when she brought me food and turned on cartoons for the whole day. Usually the cartoons were the same, so soon I already knew each episode by heart. The nanny didn't read to me at all, and she didn't buy me any toys. I had absolutely nothing to do, so I either slept or just looked at the walls of my room, fantasizing that some pictures would appear on them. I began to steal all kinds of medical supplies from the nurses who came in my room, mostly gauze, which I used to try to make dolls myself. But sometimes I managed to steal some of their medical tools. I wasn't a good thief, so the nurses immediately noticed, scolded me, and took everything away. But once I finally succeeded. I don't remember what kind of object it was. Maybe it was scissors. But the fact is that it was something very sharp, something I could use to harm myself. When the head of the clinic found out about this and realised that the nanny wasn't watching me at all, he kicked her out, called my mother again, and demanded that she finally take me away. But my mother refused, and from that moment on, she stopped paying the bills. Since the clinic stopped receiving checks from her, a new nanny never appeared in my life. Now I was taken hostage by the head of the clinic. He didn't know what to do with me under the circumstances, so he simply continued to shelter me and asked that his medical personnel look after me. So I lived there until a distant relative of mine came straight from Colombia. No, she wasn't going to take me with her, but as soon as she found out the details, she suggested that the head pick a couple that had been unsuccessfully treated in his clinic for infertility. The idea inspired the doctor, and he went and indeed found the right people. I was very lucky, because now they have become my parents. They agreed to not make this story public, and they found some people who were touched by my story so deeply that they helped them to create all the necessary documents. My mother was deprived of parental rights, and my adoptive parents took me to almost the other end of the country. Well, after that, I became the most ordinary girl, but I will never forget my early childhood years.